Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've all managed to have a refreshing cup of tea or coffee. I apologize that we're running a little bit late, so for that reason I'm going to be a little bit strict with our speakers for this next session, which is entitled Gendercide and Survivor and Eyewitness Accounts. My name's Fabian Hamilton. I'm a Labour Member of Parliament from the City of Leeds, and I'm a member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Kurdistan. I'm very privileged this afternoon to welcome three excellent speakers. Our keynote speaker, who will speak first, is Richard Beeston, who is the foreign editor of the UK Times newspaper and, most importantly, was a witness at Halabja in 1988. Richard.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. When Bayan first suggested that I might come and give you a short talk, I sort of planned to just fill in a little piece of the historical jigsaw puzzle of Halabja. I know you're all very familiar with the Anfal campaign and what happened in Halabja, and as a young reporter, I happened to have been there by accident covering the Iran-Iraq war, so perhaps I can just enlighten you a little bit on my experience. But actually, something slightly more profound happened this week when I thought, not only does the campaign to have what happened in Iraq 25 years ago certainly deserve to be recognized as genocide. I can't think of a better example in recent history of a case of someone trying to exterminate an entire population in the most brutal manner. But also, and I'll return to this at the end of my talk, I'm actually quite shocked and quite worried that we may have another occasion when something like this will happen. And it's incredibly important to remind people what did happen back then and how important it is for governments to stand up and take note and make their positions known so that we don't forget what happened in Halabja and make sure that in places like Syria and other conflict zones around the world, it's not allowed to happen again. For those of you, and I can see there's lots of people here who were probably in short trousers 25 years ago, I thought I'd just give you an overview of what the political scene was like in the late 80s. The world was still divided by the Cold War, of course, between the United States and the Soviet Union. Russia was led by Mikhail Gorbachev, who was busy trying to get his troops out of Afghanistan, ironically. Amid this global conflict was an 8-year war between Iran and Iraq, which had cost the lives of, I think the estimate is 1 million Iranians and probably 500,000 Iraqis. I had been in 1987 on the Iraqi side down in Basra, which was a pretty horrifying experience. And then I got a call from the Iranians saying, would you like to come and do the conflict from our side? So I arrived in Tehran, and I don't know how many of you have been to Tehran, but it's normally chock-a-block with traffic and whatnot. When I arrived, the streets were absolutely empty, and it was being hit by Scud missiles, about 6 a day. It was a bit, I imagine, what it must have been like during the buzz bomb attacks in London, with everyone scurrying to shelters and air raid sirens going off every few minutes and whatnot. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who were sort of hosting us, announced that they were going to take us to the northern front, which I was quite pleased about because the southern front was where everyone was getting killed. If you've ever been embedded with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, you'll know that not only do they pile 30 people into a helicopter designed to take 12, but when you suggest that it might be a little bit dangerous, they'll say, oh, no, we will all be martyrs and we'll go to heaven. And so it's not very reassuring. Anyway, we got flown up to Kermanshah in the north, and we were told that we were going into Iraq. And so we clambered aboard two American military Vietnam-era Huey helicopters and were taken over the snow-capped mountains, absolutely beautiful part of the world. And we landed in a place called Halabja, which I'd never heard of before. Rather beautiful little market town surrounded by mountains, and then there was a lake in the distance. The only problem was, of course, as we were landing, we noticed there was not a soul alive walking the streets. There was nothing there, no school children, no shops open, no cars moving, a few soldiers knocking about. And then as we began to explore our way around the town, we discovered bodies littered in the streets, scenes of obviously some absolutely horrific event. The place we spent most of our time, and I see it's illustrated in the catalogue you have in front of you today, was an area that had been hit by a cyanide bomb, possibly more than one, and a radius of about 500 meters around this area, which is a residential area, was, I described it at the time, I think, like a scene from Pompeii, but I think at least the people in Pompeii had warning that the volcano had exploded and the lava was heading down towards them. These people had probably 2 seconds, maybe less, before they were struck down. And until I looked at the program, I had no idea that the man I photographed was called Omar Kawar. He was the father holding the rather beautiful plump baby in his arms and was obviously trying to get home and didn't make it to the front door. Excuse me. We found a family who'd been sitting out in their garden, who'd also been waylaid, dead where they sat, the cat dead, the birds in the trees dead, everything just mown down like the devil had arrived. And then those who'd taken shelter in cellars, of course, weren't spared because gas is heavier than air. And so we found, several cases of going into someone's house, nobody in, finding the cellar, opening the door, and then 10 people with all the rugs and all the valuables and everything around them. And even one man who'd had the presence of mind, I suppose, to understand what was happening, who was in a pickup truck with his family in the back, again, with all their belongings, and the car just driven into a wall. So he'd obviously, as he was trying to get out of town, he died, and the car had sort of veered off to the course. We couldn't stay terribly long in Halabja because the Iraqi MiGs returned, and they were flying overhead, and obviously we were quite vulnerable in our helicopters. So after doing as quick a reporting job as we could, we found about 10 survivors. We were bundled back on the helicopters and flown back to Kermanshah, and the following day taken to a hospital where we presented with arguably a worse sight, which was a huge ward filled with people who'd suffered mustard gas. And this, of course, is the First World War chemical agent, and it doesn't normally kill you immediately, but what it does do, it blinds you, it gets into your lungs, and I believe people are still dying from the after effects of that attack to this day in hospitals in Iran and Iraq. But there were enough people able to tell us what happened to corroborate the stories we'd heard in Halabja, and I felt it was particularly compelling evidence because if I was badly wounded or dying, I certainly wouldn't blame the people the innocent side. What I mean to say is, if you're in that situation, you're going to point the finger at the people who you think did it to you. And no matter of coercion or intimidation is going to make you blame the Iranians if it was, in fact, the Iraqis. And again, we spoke to lots of survivors. And then we were taken to Tehran, where we were presented with a whole group of senior Iraqi officers who also confirmed that they were equipped, trained to use chemical weapons, and that they had been used. And I don't think anybody claimed that they'd actually used them themselves, but that it was part of the campaign that the Iraqis used to punish the Kurds. So actually, in many years of war reporting, very often all you get is one little frame of a battle or a situation, very difficult to corroborate, and usually done completely one-sidedly, and it's very difficult to get an established overview of what was going on. But in this case, we had multiple sources. We had our own eyewitness accounts, and to my mind at least, a very clear confirmation that Saddam Hussein and Ali Hassan al-Majid, Chemical Ali, were responsible for this. To my surprise, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, the story as it emerged was initially accepted, and we were asked to brief European ambassadors in Tehran on what we'd seen. But quite quickly afterwards, a campaign was launched, primarily in Washington by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the State Department, to undermine the veracity of these claims, to suggest maybe the Iranians had done it. And it later emerged, of course, that the United States, Britain, most of the European countries were secretly arming Saddam, and many European businessmen were providing him with the chemicals necessary to build his bombs. I get no satisfaction from saying this, but when they tried to make the case against Saddam in 2003, the naysayers were all saying, oh, well, you've changed your mind now because, just a few years ago, you were saying that it was the Iranians who were responsible for these gas attacks. I never really reckoned with the cynicism, I suppose, of that time. I think The Economist summed it up quite well when they called it a war between two four-letter countries, which I suppose they thought was terribly witty. But I think it just reflected the fact that a lot of the world was quite keen for Iran and Iraq to beat themselves into a stalemate, which is indeed what happened a few months later when Khomeini announced he was drinking poison and prepared to do a deal with Saddam Hussein. And the final results was that the borders barely moved an inch after all that bloodshed and all that death and all that pain. I just wanted to go back to something I said at the beginning, and that is that, the only other thing I'll mention is I did actually spend quite a lot of time in Baghdad after the US-led invasion, and I was present at one of the hearings when Chemical Ali was on trial, and I got particular satisfaction from watching this old shuffling man in court. I know it wasn't a perfect example of justice, but I felt that it was good that he finally was brought to bear for what he'd done. The reason I mentioned at the beginning about the necessity really to remind people of what happened in Halabja was this week. I don't know if, how many of you read the Times, so I think some of the other papers covered it as well. It emerged that the US Consul General in Istanbul sent a cable back to Washington saying that they suspected, they had compelling evidence, I think was the word they used, that the Syrians had used a chemical agent in Homs on December 23rd. It was not a lethal agent, but it was a debilitating one, and it was certainly some type of chemical weapon, and people complained and that they were having trouble breathing, and at the time it was uncheckable. It was one of these claims being made by the opposition. But obviously it's given a lot greater weight to have an American diplomat actually send a cable on it. And our best interpretation from speaking to experts on this and intelligence analysts and others is that possibly the regime in Syria wanted to test the water, see what sort of response the international community would react to if word of this came out. And they did it just before Christmas, while the world's looking the other way, of course. And the fear, of course, is that he'll assess that actually the world doesn't care about Syria, which is not a difficult conclusion to come to since 60,000 people have been killed and barely a finger's been lifted to try and stop what's happening or indeed help the refugees. And you could envisage a scenario where the regime gets weaker and weaker and decides it's going to have to clear out a valley or punish a certain segment of the population or frighten the civilian population into fleeing the country. Chemical weapons are not a very good weapon to use in wartime because the wind can blow them in the wrong direction, or they can disperse, and it's not a very efficient weapon to use against soldiers, but it's a very effective weapon to use if you want to cause terror, if you want people to flee. As a psychological weapon, it's absolutely devastating, and we saw that, of course, in Kurdistan. And I just leave you with that thought that it's hugely important that when these things arise, we don't let people forget about Halabja. Thank you.
Richard, thank you for your very moving first-hand account, which brings home the reason that we are that we're here today. Our next speaker is Kamaran Nawrooz Haider, who is the UK representative of the Halabja Chemical Victims Society. Kamaran.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say on behalf of the Halabja Chemical Victims Society, many thankful for the arrangement of this conference, the KRG, and thankful for all the people who shared today in the conference, in the program of the conference. Also, thank you for you to attend in this conference. We are really proud when you see today is many people, still many people work with us to succeed our case, a case of Halabja in abroad. As you know, 20 years ago, if you talk about Halabja or Anfal in this area to anyone, he closes his eyes and his ear. He says, "I'm blind, I'm deaf, I don't know what you say." But now everyone, when you talk about Halabja, everyone looking for news to know about more now about Halabja, Anfal, or other cases. I'm here today as a representative of Halabja Chemical Victims Society, also as a witness of the Halabja incident. There's a message from Halabja Chemical Victims Society which they sent from Halabja town. It's not, it's a short time, I can read it. It's on the page 7. I have you read and understand about our opinion about this conference. Therefore, I take my time for speak about as a witness of Halabja incident. In that time, I was 11 years old. I was with my family. My family was including father, mother, 4 brothers, 1 sister. And this is my mother, name is Salma. And that's my brother, named Rozgar. He was 19 years old at that time. I only got these 2 photos. I don't have more photos of them. I was with them. I remember when Halabja freed by Peshmerga fighters, as they say, by supporting Iranian militaries. On the first day when we are freedom, we are very happy. We are really very glad because Halabja, around more than 20 years, was the first time being freed. Was the first time being empty from Iraqi militaries. But in the same ways, we feel stress, fear, because we know Saddam Hussein, we know how he is dangerous. That day was going on, and night came. My mom, at night, he boiled some egg to prepare food, even if we run away, if something happened and run away. Because we know something happened, because we know Saddam Hussein will do something. Next day came, is 16th of March. I remember it's around 11 o'clock or 11:30 at the morning. I played with my little brother. He was 2 years younger than me. He was 2 years younger than me. I played in the garden. My mom, father, and my sister been together in the garden. My other 2 old brothers been on the outside. He went to outside to hear any news, anything to hear about it. Then we saw some Iraqi fighters, fly fighters to Halabja sky. They start bombardment. When they start bombardment, Halabja is shaken. I mean, all people starting to cry, shouting, running, and the people being out, they came back, including my 2 older brothers. Then we ran to our shelter. My father built a shelter 1 year ago in our garden. Our garden was very big. At that time, most of the Halabja houses built a shelter because at that time was Iran and Iraq war, and many times being bombarded. That's why they built a shelter to keep themselves in the house. We ran in the shelter, and some of our neighbors came to our shelter as well. We stayed at the shelter. Bombardment was started. My father decided to run away, to run out of Halabja, but Iraqi military used intelligent military tactics, because he started bombarding of Halabja by napalm around of Halabja, not inside. He started around of Halabja. That's military tactic to keep people of Halabja or citizens of Halabja inside of Halabja to kill as much as he wants. That's why we couldn't go out. We stayed at the shelter. Bombardment was started about 1 hour. Then after 1 hour, we feel some smell. It's like apple, banana, garlic. When we feel that smell, then we knew that's chemical, because Saddam Hussein been used in other areas in Kurdistan, some more villages. That's why when we know that, then everyone in the shelter, is about 45 people in the shelter, start crying, shouting, because chemical weapon is more dangerous, much dangerous than simple weapon. Simple bomb. Bomb, you can't prevent yourself or keep yourself in somewhere, but chemical mixing with the air, so you can't go or run to anywhere. Anyway, we stayed in the shelter. At that time, when we knew that chemical, my mom ran to upstairs to the house and in the rooms. He brought some towels and clothes with a big can of water. She told us to make a wet and put on our face and skin to prevent burn. Then we did. We make wet towels and put on our face and hands. Bombardment was continued. One bomb was dropped in a house behind our house exactly. It's overnight, I mean, when it was behind our house. One of chemical bomb dropped there. Then my older brother, who is 3 years older than me, named Rebwar, he ran out from the shelter. He said, I'm going to see what's going on in our neighbor. My father, mother, and other people in the shelter shouted, don't go, stay here, please, don't go out. But he went out. Then we waited for him to come back, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, no come back. My mom called him Rebwar from the shelter. No one answer. Then she decided to go out to what's going on to him. She signed up to go out. My youngest brother, his name is Karzan. He was 1 year and 1.5 years old. He cried. Then she picked him and ran away out of the shelter. Then, just in 1 or 2 minutes, we heard from mom shouting, crying. She said, oh, Rebwar has died. And cry with the shouting like that. Then she came back to the shelter. The shelter was a stair, about 10 to 12 stairs. When she came down with my youngest brother, 1.5 years, she dropped off. Then she stopped her body in here exactly. That's in front of the door of the shelter exactly. She dropped off here. Herself and my youngest brother died in that place exactly. Then everyone's crying, shouting, crying, like like horrible. I can't describe how it's going on. Everyone went out, but the youngest people, like me, stayed in the shelter because my father many times warned me and my younger brother, don't go to anywhere, don't move, don't kids always moving, going like that. He said, well, stay where you are. Me and my youngest brother stay in the shelter. They went out, the adult people went out to know what's going on. I heard from them from the shelter and they're in garden. They crying, shouting. I mean, my brothers, sisters, and my father. That's taking about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Then gradually the sound is lost. I mean, missed. And myself feel tiredness and tears drop from my eyes. I stayed in where I was. I didn't do anything. Then time by time, I feel more weakness, more tired, more tear from my eyes. Time is going, and the night came. I stayed at the night on the shelter. Some people around me. I knew some, at the beginning I heard from some people breathing, but at night I didn't hear anyone to breathe or speak or like that. I tried to drink water from the can, which my mom brought it to make a towel wet. My first childhood friend named Hoshman, it was beside me. He was our neighbor. He kicked the can. He said, "Don't drink it. That's dirty." I didn't drink. Then come back and I lied in the shelter. I lied in this place. No, sorry, it's not in here. Anyway, so there's the picture. It's not here. I lied in the shelter. The night's gone, and I was feel tiredness, more tears, and I lost my feeling. I knew that my mom in front of me died. I knew that my younger brother. I knew all my family outside died, but no crying, no shout, nothing to do. I was just like a discipline, lie in the shelter because I lost my mind, affected my mind. Next day came. I feel more tiredness, itching my skin. My eyes so very weak. I couldn't see very well. That day, stay there around midday. I don't know what time exactly. I tried to go out to know what's going on outside. I tried to stand up, couldn't, because I was weak or I bent. My skin was bent. I tried my best. I walked like a toddler or like a cat. But I went to the upstairs from the shelter to the garden. When I went to the garden, from the garden, I saw my brother's guy in front of the garden died. My sister held my other brother, Rebel, who was first died. He held in her arm. They died together. They died together. I saw my father very far from me. It was in front of the bathroom. The bathroom is far from the shelter. From here to around from here till the last chair. Yeah, I mean this distance. I saw he was lying there, but I didn't see blood. I didn't see any blood, but some people, or several people, not only one, said, "We saw your father during the bombardment. He lost his mind. He been like a crazy." Thank you. He been like a crazy. Then he killed himself by knife. I didn't see blood, but several people say we saw that situation. Then I saw them. My families died there. I went back to the. Then at that time, as I said, nothing fell. I saw all bodies, but honestly, I don't want to tell you honestly, no crime. Nothing. I don't know why. It doesn't mean that I didn't love them, but I lost my mind. I tried to go out to the main door of the garden to go to the outside of the house. I tried to open the door, the main door. I heard some people in the main road shouting like a fighting, honestly. I don't know what was going on in the outside. I don't know what's going on. Like a fighting, like a shouting like that. Then, because I was a child, I scared. I came back, then back to the shelter. I stayed and I lied where I was, in the same place. That day gone, around evening of that day, some people come to our garden, they speak Kurdish. They say, oh, all of them died. I tried to call them, I'm still alive in the shelter. But they left me. I stayed in the second night in the shelter. Next day come. During that night, then start conscious, vomiting, sick. All my skin was burned. Next day came, I was blind. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move at all. Like I feel that I'm still alive. I'm still alive. I don't know what time was exactly. I was conscious. When I woke up, I heard some people in the shelter. They speak foreign language. I knew, as I told Mr. Richard, if he's or somebody else, he wasn't Iranian, he wasn't Kurdish, he wasn't Arabic. But I'm not sure, English or other countries, but foreign language. Because I was a child, I couldn't separate languages. He came into the shelter. I felt that he's in front of the door. I tried to call him, I'm still alive. I couldn't. I couldn't speak, and I didn't see him. I tried to move I moved my body little. He didn't see me because no light. The shelter was very dark. He left me alone. He went out. Then stayed. Next night come. Time by time, I was more worse. Especially conscious, many times conscious wake up. And I never eat any or any drink. I haven't done a drink or eat since the bombardment. Next day came, I woke up, I was conscious. I woke up, I felt that, by the sound woke up, I felt that some people in the shelter, they speak Iranian. They speak Iranian. I didn't see him because I was completely blind. I tried to call him, I couldn't. Then slightly holding my hand, that hand. I slightly holding my hand. Then they saw me. They said, he's still alive. They picked me out. They picked me out, they put me in a pickup. I know that's a pickup because empty, not covered in the back, in the pickup car. The pickup was full of the people. I heard them, I didn't see them. But the full of the people, they crying, shouting, they've been injured, poisoned. Then the pickup drive around Halabja, roads of Halabja, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I don't know how long exactly. Every time they put more bodies on the pickup. When they picked me first time, I was in the top of the people. After 10 minutes, I was under, because many people they put on my top. I don't know how long exactly, but I expect 15 minutes driving. Then I heard helicopter sound of helicopter. I knew that's helicopter. They start to pick up people, the injuries. They picked me. I know that they picked me, they took me out from pickup, then I lost my consciousness. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in the helicopter or like that. When I woke up, I felt somebody watching me. I asked, where am I? They said, you are in Kamaran hospital. Kamaran is a city in Tehran. Kamaran hospital. I was blind, no hair, all my skin burned. And breathlessness, I couldn't speak, I couldn't breathe very well. Then I stayed in there for 40 days around. Until more than 30 days, I was completely blind. Then gradually my eye opened. When I felt slightly better, they transferred me to Shahid Beheshti Hospital in Tehran. I stayed in Tehran around 6 months for treatment. Then when I felt a bit better, they sent me to a camp, refugee camp, which is Halabja citizens, survivors, been lived there. Name is Sangur. They moved me to there, they sent me to there. And they shouted, who knows that man? Nobody knows, recognized me. Someone said, yeah, I know him. I know who is it. But his grandmother living in another refugee camp. His name is Harsin. Then they transferred me to Harsin refugee camp. In there, I met my grandmother. At that time, my grandmother around 70 years old. Now he's 96 years old. Hopefully she's still alive. I lived with her till, after that, she looked after me. And I always thanks for her to look after me, really. that's my story of during the Halabja incident. But before that one, when I said Hoshman, who was my childhood friend, that he kicked the big can of water, I thought he died. You know, I thought he died as well. But after 24 years, in 15th August 2012, I meet him again, and he's still alive. That's Hoshman. Another great news, he married last month. Yeah. But unfortunately, he lost his family, same me. That's sad. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my bloody story, really. I always live with that story painfully. But that's life, and that's happened. But another thing, and a comment which I have to talk after my story is, I want to say, that's history. As a man, I tell that most of us talking about history. But now, Halabja people and Anfal people, Anfal survivors, they need to work for the future. That's history. Now that's gone. I know that's painful, but still, family of the survivors of Anfal, of Halabja, they're still living in the painful. That's why you have to work to make them better life. Thankful for that conference based on genocide. But I said, I hope not that genocide by no means. What's mean genocide no means? Kurdistan government and Iraqi government recognize as genocide. But I asked the ministers and former ministers and Mr. Dr. Osman, on the basis of genocide, what they did for Halabja. People of the Halabja like when they glad to be genocide because they want to get compensation. They give them compensation as much as the victims. Yeah, they want to look after them healthy, socially. And I asked them, do they now still murders of Halabja and some of the murders of Halabja incident and Anfal incident still alive, still free in Kurdistan and Iraq? You know, that people, the families of the victims, they need to, if they want to recognize as a genocide, we need DISA, because genocide without a DISA is meaning nothing. We don't need genocide if you not get compensation. If the murders, if the people who killed our family still free, we don't need compensation. We don't need genocide. Why genocide? Genocide is meaning nothing. And another, finally, is very opportune to say something to end my speaking. I tell the Minister Matia and all the peoples, especially the MPs, MP from Iraq, MP from Kurdistan, MP, UK MPs, and other organizations getting to Halabja or Anfal. Halabja is not only monument and graveyard. Unfortunately, when the people get into there, they go to the graveyard, they put one flower there, then they came back to monument, watching history, watching some photos, then reading a paper, then say bye-bye. If you want to now understand about the emotion of the family of the victims, it's not like that. Take a few hours, go to inside of Halabja, drop off in your car, walk in the road of Halabja, visit some families of the victim individually, talk to them. What's your emotional? How's your life? Then you understand our emotional. I know all of you about Halabja and Anfal painful. But history now, you know, 1,000 people die, 1,000 people missed. But still families of the victim of this are still living in the painful. All of you, I know all of you know about Halabja and very painful, you have emotional. If correct, all of you is not saying my emotional. I understand how is my emotional or family of the victim emotional. I hope these people who visit Halabja contact directly with the families of the victim and the Halabja citizens to understand them emotionals. Thank you very much.
Kamaran. I realised how difficult that must have been for you, and I think we all felt the pain that you expressed.
And, sorry, that's my family body. Sorry. That's my little brother, 1 year old, 1.5 years old, that I recognize. My mother recognized and my father recognized. Others, I can't recognize them. That's in from my house's door. And that spot black in the wall, I did a few days before. I did fire a few days before it was my little brother. We did a small fire a few days before the other bombardment, just for kidding. That spot in black in the wall. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. There's nothing else I can add. Our next speaker is Thana Al Bassam, who is based here in the UK and is herself a survivor of the Faily Kurdish Genocide.
First of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for everyone attend and give attention to what's happened to Kurds in Iraq. It's an honor for me to stand here and talking under these flags. And hopefully next time I will stand and talking under completely new flag for a new Iraq. My name is Thana Al Bassam. I was born as a first child to a very well-known family, Kurdish Faily, living in a small, calm town called An-Nu'maniya, located 140 kilometers south of Baghdad. My family lives there since 1910 in same city. Before I start talking about my family story, I would like to mention everybody now in the world, most people now in the world knows about Kurd in Iraq, heard about Halabja and Anfal. But unfortunately, very few people knows about part of Kurd people called Kurd Faily. Because of the media, because of the, I don't know who's the responsible about hiding this big tragedy happened in Iraq ever. And Kurd Faily considered as the group who suffered most of any other people in Iraq because they consider as a Kurd from one side and a Shia from another side. So the punishment was double on them. Most of them living in south and middle of Iraq, mixing with the Arab people and living among the Arab people, but always knowing they are Kurd Faily. Most of them living in Baghdad, the family were being very rich and reform really a good power, and they being a good supportive to the Kurd people in north of Iraq always. The government in Iraq started to remove them since in 1970, but it was very light procedure. But the worst thing, it's happened in 1980. I was 7 years old at that time. I still remember every single details of that night. I was slept with my grandparents, with my little sister, because my mom went to her uncle in Baghdad to see a doctor there. I woke up during the night. I didn't know the time, but I knew later it was 3 o'clock in the a.m. And I recognized my aunties, my uncles, my grandmom, really scared, terrified, and they didn't know what to do. And I saw a few stranger masked men wearing Ba'athis security uniforms and holding guns. One of them, he pointed to me and to my sister and shouted on my auntie. She was 17 years old. And he asked her, "Are these girls belong to you?" And she replied quickly, "No, they belong to our neighbors. Their mom left them with us because she left to Baghdad." And she came to me tried to put me back to sleep and say, don't worry, nothing happened, just go back to sleep. And when I woke up in the morning, I didn't find anyone in the house, except my father. He was sitting, his eye was really full of tears, red, and I didn't understand what happened, and my father couldn't able to answer my questions. And without knowing and understand what displacement mean, I just felt I'm not going to see them again. And from that moment, I felt I lost my childhood, and I never have returned to be a normal person again from that moment. I had to live with my mom. She was only the person stay in Iraq from her family, big family. I had to watch her crying every single day. She didn't know anything about her brothers, sisters, her dad, her mom, nothing, until she died in 1999. She didn't know anything about them. When you live in this environment, you know, like, there's nothing normal in this life. And I'm sorry, their Kamaran, he said, this is the life. I'm sorry, this is not the life should be. This is not the life should anyone can have it in the world. And this is why we are here, to prevent this happen to anyone else. The house was officially under my father's name. And this is why my father left the rental house who we lived in and moved all his furniture to my grandparents' house. And after a few weeks, they came to us and they asked us to leave the house with only our clothes. 4 children and dad and mom, we've been thrown in the streets. And they took the home, furniture, everything. And we left to stay again with one of our relatives in a small room. Actually, I don't know, the life was under Saddam Hussein. I don't know how anyone describe it. Nothing was normal at that time. We lived for many, many years after that. We expecting they going to attack us in any moment. Many years went in fear and terror. Till 1988, they decided to kick us as well outside of the country. One of my father's friends, he hid us in his small island. I don't know how to say it, in Tiger Rivers. It's very far away from the city, and we hide ourselves there for 1 month. We left the schools, we left everything, and we stayed there. No one knows anything about us, and my father friend worked so hard and to reach some people who really have effect in the government, and after 1 month, Saddam Hussein decided to sign by his hand a decision. He said, okay, let them allowed to stay in Iraq, but they should replace their Iraqi nationality with Iranian residency. But thanks for God, we didn't give them the Iraqi nationality, we have it. And after 1991, I used this fake one to enroll my university. Otherwise, I didn't have a chance to enroll any university and finish my university. The Kurd Faily, when they took them and thrown them over on the border, Iranian and Iraqi border, my auntie sent us a letter through the Kuwait after a few months. And the letter was long, like 8 papers. And she described every single details in this painful journey. And I can't say no one and no editor in the world, in Hollywood, can create such a tragedy film like what she wrote in this letter, and we still keep it. When they throw them on the border, they even didn't show them the right way to reach Iran. They just put them on the border. Sometimes they direct them in wrong way, and they allow them to walk on their feet 3 days, and all what they need to walk is just a few hours to reach the nearest city in Iran. And many, many tragedy and disaster happened to them. Child died, pregnant women just give a birth, and it's a lot of things nobody can imagine. And they, just like, and simply without any reason, they stolen their identity, house, money, present, past, and the future. And most of them, they living in very poor campus in Iran for now 30 years, and more than 30 years. They don't have any identity. They don't know if they belong to Iran or Iraq. Many, many generations, 2, 3 generations, are just like they are lost. And the worst part, they just separate the young men aged between 17 to 50 from their family and put them in the prison and send even the older people, children and women only to Iran. And these young men, they just executed, I think it's about 10,000 men, and no one till now find anybody of them. In my relative and family, like cousins and second cousins, we lost 22 young men. One of them, he was disabled, used the crutches. I still remember his face very well. And one of them, he was one of 3 brothers. His age was 16, and they just keep him because he's fat and just like have a lot of stories and memories stuck in my mind as a witness, as a survivor, as a victim. I don't know who can be a victim. It's very difficult to decide who's really more painful, to kill someone in 1 minute or to see some people living with their tragedy and dying every day, and they can't be a normal person again. It's a very difficult decision to say which one is painful. For me, as Kurd Faily is just like people who are living in really big tragedy. No one till now think about them very well and give them their right or think even what their future and what can they do for them. In 2003, I launched one story. It's really stuck in my mind as many stories, but I don't know how the time allowed me to tell. But this story is I always said, hopefully I can have the camera to record this situation. One of my neighbors, who he's a Faily, and his wife was Arabic, and she was a mom for 6 children. And that night, when they just took them to the prison, she gave a birth in the prison to a new baby girl. And her parents heard about that, so they went to see the baby and the mom. And the mom threw his baby to her parent, and she said, I'm going with my husband and my children. And I can't take it with me because I don't know what's going on. So the grandfather recorded the baby under his name, and she lives with her grandparent. Until 2003, we went to the border to see or to meet our families for the first time. At that time, this girl, I still remember her face. She was Paul. She was like a human came from another planet. She was trembling because this was the first moment she going to see her mom and dad and her brothers and sisters. And I swear no one of you can imagine how the situation was. Another story, if the time is allowed. Hassan is my neighbor. He's Arabic as well. He's very nice young man. He graduated in 1980 from engineering university, and he, as a compulsory because the war, he joined the army. He was in love with one girl from very rich family, Kurd Faily, living in Baghdad, and she was with him in same university. Hassan, he was served in north of Iraq, and they received order to move their to I think the middle of the Mahran and Zirbati at that time. So he said, when we just arrived and we as a soldiers, we just want to put our things. The other soldiers, he just like found something, and everybody was like crowdy about something, and he just went to see what's going on. And what he saw his lover with her sister, both of them naked, died after they raped them and killed them on the border. And this has happened to a lot of young Kurd Faily women. They just removed them alone over the border. Another one, I went with my mom. This is in 1986. One of my father friend family, they just put them on the prison to send them to Iran. And the family was created from 5 girls and 1 son. I went with my mom to see the family in Sijn al-Radwaniyah in Baghdad. I still remember the woman was dying, just she wanted to know where they took her husband and her son. In same prison cell, we saw a teenager girl. She was 15 or 16 years old, but she lost both her legs and she used the crutches. And my mom asked this lady, what's going to this girl? And she said, before 1 month, they just decided to depart, to send her with family to Iran. But during they've been walking, the mine was exploded on them, and she lost the leg while the rest of the family went to Iran. So the government or the security Iraqi bring back the girl, and she stayed alone without her legs, stay alone in the prison. This girl, I saw her in my eyes. I don't know if that...
We are running out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you.